So let's go and see if we finish downloading Drupal. Great. So we've got the Drupal site cloned into the Tom Sutton Heating folder. So if we go into that folder, great, we've got it here. And we're on the 8.2 branch, which is the most recent branch, but not the stable branch. So if we run git tag, we can see all the different tagged releases of Drupal going all the way back to version 4. So if we wanted to, we could go back in time and look at Drupal version 4. But we're only interested in Drupal 8 at the moment. And what we want to do is check out, so get the code for the most recent stable release of Drupal. Because what we've got here is also the cutting edge, if you will, version of Drupal. So I'll just go onto Drupal.org and find out what is the most recent stable release of Drupal. So 8.1.8. So what we'll do is we'll check out to the 8.1.8 release. To 8. I forgot what it was. 8.1.8. Fantastic. So now we're on that tagged release, and we can check out to a new branch, and we'll call that Drupal 8.1.8. Okay, so git branch, great, we're on that branch. So to avoid pushing the code, so if we make changes, the way Git works is if we do a change, we can then push that to our repository. At the moment, everything's local, and we just have a local repository. But if we do git show remote, or git remote show, great. And if we pass it the v argument, git, sorry, I've forgotten what it is. Git remote. There we go. Git remote -v show. At the moment, the remote is set back to where we got it from, so Drupal.org. So if we were to push our code to a repository is where you publish your changes, it would try and push it back to Drupal.org. Now we don't want to do that, so we want to remove that remote. So remove origin, and now we'll show again. Obviously we don't have it, and we're at the moment we're not interested in that, because we're just going to develop a local site, and perhaps we'll do another video of how to do Git properly. This is just to prevent us from trying to push to a repository that we're not allowed to push to. It wouldn't work, but it would cause confusion. So let's get to the bottom of why we're getting that 500 error. So we'll just refresh. Yeah, we get the 500. Let's look at our logs. Apache error log. Excellent. So we've got fatal error, failed opening required, autoload.php. Now I know this is because we haven't composed Drupal. So Drupal 8 uses a thing called Composer. Now what is Composer? Let's see what it says on its own page. Here we go. So Composer is a dependency manager for PHP. So since Drupal 8, Drupal is now making use of excellent bits of open source software made elsewhere. So perhaps the most commonly mentioned one of those is a open source contribution called Symfony framework, and a large part of the requests library from Symfony is now used in Drupal. The requests part of Symfony handles the URL handling. So when a user goes to /user, or perhaps they go to a specific content type, etc., all of that is handled now by Symfony and various other packages, etc. It comes under the phrase of proudly invented elsewhere, whereas traditionally, apparently, Drupal had the notion of Drupalisms, and a Drupalism is a tendency that Drupal seemed to have of creating solutions in a Drupal type way, which made it arguably difficult for people outside of the Drupal community to contribute code back. Now that's significantly changing with the introduction of packages from the wider PHP community. And that goes both ways. So now Drupal is contributing back to Symfony and vice versa, and there's lots of other open source projects that Drupal is making use of. I don't know all of them, but we can find out by looking at the composer file, which we now have because we pulled the source code down from Drupal.org. Sorry for this very verbose video. I'm quite new to making videos. It's my style at the moment. I'm sure it will change. So let's have a look at composer.json. Okay, so this lists all of the dependencies that Drupal has. Whether it lists all of them or not, I'm not entirely sure. But let's see what's going on here. So we have a name Drupal, obviously there's a dependency on Drupal's minimum stability, distribution 8, readme, composer.json, composer, vendor test. I'm confused. Composer, I don't know enough about Composer, to be honest. I know the command that we have to run, however, is composer install, which I do have installed on the local host. Composer, not computer. Composer. And what that does is it reads the composer config file and it will fetch all of the dependencies that Drupal has stated it needs. So let's see what happens. Okay. So what's it doing? It's getting all of the various dependencies and downloading the correct versions of those into the project. So we've got Doctrine, which is a way of, I think that's a way of documenting code for easier for creating documentation of your code base. Could be wrong. Nope, totally wrong. Okay, so Doctrine is a object relational mapper for Drupal. So it's a way of, it sounds like PDO if you're familiar with PDO with PHP, a way of abstracting different relational database management systems. So you can do, for example, a select all on a database table, and then that will be translated into the particular database service that you're using, whether that be MariaDB, DB2, most likely MySQL, Composer, more Composer. Symfony, so there's a Symfony, all the various components of Symfony that are being pulled in, and Zen framework, made by the founders of PHP, I believe. So Zen feed, Guzzle, that's to do with requests, and here's the routing that we mentioned earlier. So now what we have is the addition of a vendor folder in our code, which has all of the various dependencies that we didn't have before. I perhaps should have done an ls before this because it doesn't show, but before I did the composer install command, the vendor folder was not there and all of these dependencies were not. So Twig, for example, Wikimedia, all these different dependencies have been pulled in, and that should fix the 500 error that we were having before. So if we open our local host website, we should get taken to the install page for Drupal. Excellent. This only took us 10 minutes.